When you think about the state of Maine, you might have a lot of images that come to mind. Rocky shores, overcast skies,
Bar number 19.
horror stories about killer clowns, and of course, lobster. With the crisp, salty smell of the Atlantic, I finished the last leg of my road trip. All the way from California to Maine, I had made it from corner to corner of the United States. For the last part of my journey, I had to venture even further north in Maine, to some of the lesser-known areas of the state. Beyond the scattered lakes and into the dense forests, the Appalachian Trail twists and winds to this point, Baxter State Park. I had lucked out by getting a quintessential lean-to shelter in the park itself, right along the trail. For most of us laypeople, the Park of Baxter is relatively unknown. However, for the mountain lovers out there, they may know it by a different name. Among the Penobscot Natives, this mountain was referred to as the greatest mountain, or, in their language, Katahadin. And I'm going to be hiking that tomorrow. So I'm at a lean-to site today, which is a little different than a regular campsite with a tent, because no tents are allowed. One of the things I kind of neglected about, but definitely should have known better, is how many flies and mosquitoes are going to be right next to a stream campsite without a tent tonight, which will be interesting. I might just go full Sarko mummy and wrap myself up with a little breathing hole for me to eat a bunch of mosquitoes tonight, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to get a really early rise. It'll be good. Knowing that I needed to get an early start, I prepped a sleeping pad and bag and quickly drifted off to bed, just as the sun was setting. The next morning, the sky erupted in a blue light before my alarm even went off at 4 a.m. I knew I must be pretty far east. So you know what they say, the early bird gets the worm? Well, what they don't say is the early bird gets all the spider webs in their face, because no one else has knocked them down yet. It's kind of hard to believe, but it's actually like 4:30 a.m. right now. We are so far east on the Eastern time zone, and it doesn't help that we're a little bit north, that it's honestly so bright so early here. So like I mentioned before, the plan today is to hike to the top of Mount Katahadin. So for right now, I'm following the Appalachian Trail, which runs adjacent to the stream, and we are slowly but surely heading uphill. From the get-go, the trail went up, but not so steep that it wasn't enjoyable. I followed the trail to Baxter Peak, hugging the nearby stream. Shortly, I crossed the wooden bridge and saw the clear water below. And, just on the other side, there was a break in the trees which gave a magnificent view of the 100-mile wilderness. Not even 100 feet away, Katahadin Falls gushed over rocks and branches nearby. Greenery sprung up all around me and danced in the wind. In the morning light, their colors reflected the blue skies around. But, in the cover of the densely packed forest, darkness still held firm. So this is my first time in Maine, and obviously first time in Katahadin, but it's also the first time I've gone hiking alone on the East Coast. On one hand, it's kind of nostalgic to be back. On the other hand, I didn't really do a whole lot of this when I lived here in the first place, so it's all kind of new still. You know, I was really hoping Andrew, Robbie, and Brian could join me, but they didn't wake up in time. I gotta say, I kept talking about how diverse California was. You had deserts, you had mountains, you had forests, and I never really appreciated just how diverse the East Coast is too. The different type of forests out here. You still have mountains, you have wetlands, you have coasts as well. You have hills, marshes, bogs, and then a whole different type of variety of trees out here. And the sheer number of trees out here is just staggering. It is green beyond belief. Well, I have a ways to go, so I'm gonna keep going. I know I've said a lot of things about how high the mountains are on the west coast, but I gotta show you this. Look how steep that is up there. That's just boulder after boulder. I think Mount Katahadin might actually give me a run for my money. It might even be comparable to Baldy, maybe even Whitney. We'll see. Well, it better not be Whitney because I'm not ready to hike Whitney. So one of the other things I'm noticing about hiking mountains on the East Coast is there's a lot smaller rocks than I'm used to. On the West Coast, I'm pretty good at just putting my feet wherever they land. The only thing I have to worry about is dirt slipping. Well, here, I've fallen more than a few times, and so I'd say I think I need to walk a little bit more light-footedly and with intention. I like that, light-footedly and with intention. This is definitely a lot more bouldery and a lot more of a climb than I gave the East Coast credit for. One of the other things I'm quickly noticing about hiking here is that unlike the Sierras, where there are trees but there's not anywhere near this dense of trees, you can see your progress as you go higher and higher. I know I'm going higher but I have no actual vantage to see how far I've made it up. It's kind of frustrating in a way. Anyway, keep going. Look at this. Mount Katahdin? More like can't go 10 feet without hitting a boulder in. I hate myself. Well, it looks like the trees are actually starting to thin out a bit. And behind me is a little bit of sun. It's about time. All right, let's go. Sunlight on a cool morning like this is as good as a warm cup of coffee. And trust me, I love coffee. This is like nothing I've ever seen before. Beautiful. I mean, look at this. You just have to go up a tiny little waterfall all the way up to there. I mean, it's like you're walking up a wall here. And granted, you're pretty high up, but... All right. I climbed up boulder after boulder. And I use the word climb in the literal sense here, since this was barely even hiking. Still in the shadow of the mountain, I was reinvigorated by the stunning views I was just now able to see. I continued up climbing and occasionally stopping to take in the views. A few other eager hikers passed me by, which was a good thing because if it weren't for them, I would have doubted that I was actually on the right trail. Bouldering turned into straight up vertical climbing as I struggled to hoist myself into the rocks above. more I leapfrogged from boulder to boulder, I really started to doubt if I was on the trail. But fortunately, I found some hints along the way. So the important thing about doing this boulder climbing is to look out these painted white stripes, because they tell you exactly where you need to go. Finally, out of the bouldering and the windy part, but I'm sure that is not the last I'll be seeing of that, because after all, I do have to go down the same way I came up. Or do I go that way or that way? Looks like I go back up that way. Great. Yeah, I'm not done with bouldering at all. And while this wasn't the windiest place on earth, it certainly felt like it. I cannot emphasize how much bouldering there is here. I just did a part that took me way too long because I was like, there's no way somebody can do this. But sure enough, they can. Yeah, that's where you're supposed to. Anyway, I'm in there now. I climbed a bit more until I found some level ground, thinking it might be smooth sailing from here. As I rounded the top, however, I realized I had so much more climbing to do. But like all hiking, you have to just keep walking. And kept walking I did. Up and up and up and up. Up and more ups. And up and up and up and up. And up and up and up. Until I hit the tableland, which offered a true break in the uphill. I haven't made it to the top of Mount Katahadin yet, but I have made it to the feature that is known as the tabletop. And you can kind of see why it's called the tabletop. Compared to what I was just on, this is pretty much a cakewalk. But the wind has definitely not subsided, and I still got a few more miles to put under my belt. The thing I am most worried about, though, is going downhill. With long legs like mine, I tend to be extremely clumsy walking downhill. Up ahead, there's a bit of a historical landmark that holds some significance to us and to our channel's roots. So this is Thoreau Spring. And if you know anything about our channel, you know that we have very romantic narration at times. And a lot of it Andrew took as inspiration from Henry David Thoreau himself. So I guess in 1846, Henry David Thoreau did climb this mountain, which is pretty cool. Honestly, I didn't know that. And here's the plaque. Let me also just say something to all the East Coasters who like to hike. Out on the West Coast, we have this amazing invention called the switchback. So rather than just going straight up a mountain, you actually zigzag a mountain. And it'd be great if you guys had some of that here too. But I don't want to sound like I'm complaining. You just like to do it on hard mode. This looks just like the island that Luke Skywalker reclused himself to at the end of Force Awakens and at the beginning of The Last Jedi. I'm almost half expecting to see him up here. And while Star Wars may be or may not be one of the best pieces of art of our time, I'd like to borrow a bit of Thoreau's comments on Katahadin as I reached the summit. The mountains seemed a vast aggregation of loose rocks, as if sometime it had rained rocks, and they lay as they fell on the mountainsides. They were the raw materials of a planet dropped from an unseen quarry, which the vast chemistry of nature would anon work up, or work down, into the smiling and verdant plains and valleys of Earth. The tops of mountains are among the unfinished parts of the globe, whether it is a sight insult to the gods to climb and pry into their secrets and try their effect on our humanity. Only daring and insolent men, perchance, go there. Well, there was the top. A lot of people came from a lot of different ways. Really an incredible place. No clue a place like this on the East Coast could exist. And the good news is it's going to be really easy to go back down. Yeah, they have an elevator right behind me, so yeah, here, look. Okay, obviously there are no elevators on the mountain, and going down ended up being twice or 10 times as hard as going up. But since this was my first time in New England, I really had to check out some of the other nearby areas. I swung by Philadelphia, where I met up with a good friend, Sean Jepson, who took me out and bought me a Philly cheesesteak sandwich, which was fantastic. We also swung by Independence Hall.
Got a carriage. Carriage right next to a bus.
You got the cheesesteaks. Forget Independence Hall.
Big promotion.
On the way, I spent a few nights in New York City, seeing a good friend, Ryan Gabus, also known as Sotto Voce, the musician. Also along the way, I stopped in Massachusetts to see a good friend from college, Josh Novak and his fiancée Claire, who took me up to the top of Sugarloaf Mountain for some incredible views. And finally, I swung by Mount Washington, the highest point in the Northeast, for some fantastic views, clam chowder, and some pretty strong winds. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe and join our Patreon community if you want to support our videos. Today's featured Patreon photo is McAfee Knob by Kevin Lutz. If you like this side video, why don't you check out some of our other side videos like Point Reyes or Lake Tahoe? And if you really want to check out the road trip that led to this point, go and watch those 3 episodes. It's a fantastic ride. You're going to have a great time. But always, thanks for watching.